what do you think about the remarks that our last guest that we had, Sig Mosley, who when I talked with him prior to coming in and doing the podcast with us, ran into him at the state capitol and talked about some of the work that we're doing together through ATVL, and he mentioned that oh yeah, Dennis and I go way back. So I would love to hear some thoughts there, but more specifically, he echoed some comments that in another like tribute video for you online, John Yates made a comment about how not many people in Atlanta are willing to take risk like the one you were perceived to take in starting Hayes Microcomputer Products. Do you think this is true, or do you think it was true, still is true, or do you look at it differently? Because that's something that we heard both from Sig and John, and that's something that I think we've talked about a little offline, but love to hear your thoughts about that.
Well, if you go back in time to like the 1970s and 1980s, that was really a formative period for technology in Georgia. And, Scientific Atlanta was here, and MSA, which was a software, the large mainframe software company for big company software. And you had your big companies like IBM and AT&T and stuff like that. Well, in that environment, starting a new business was very risky, because if you went to the bank, they had no idea what you were doing. And if you tried to raise money, there were very few venture capitalists in the Atlanta area in those days. Actually, we identified that as a shortage. The governor, I'm not sure exactly what year it was, but somewhere in the late 70s, I think, Governor Busby, I guess at the end of Governor Busby's term, he created a Science and Technology Commission for a period of time, and we worked on basically teaching the state government how to develop new science and technology-based business. And some of the sketches I made explaining things to people during those meetings ended up in the report for the governor. The idea of something getting invented at the university and then getting spun out into a company is a pretty difficult process. Then taking something in a company and scaling it up to be a major market player is another very difficult process. So there's a lot of businesses that you think would do well that die along that path. It's a road with a lot of bodies all along, of the ideas that looked good at the time that didn't make it. So what a lot of my friends and people I know that help startup companies, what we try to do is help the founders understand what it takes to be successful, to get to the point where they can scale their business successfully and not be one of those that wish we had been able to do a better job. If we get 10% of the startups to reach maturity, then that would be a wonderful outcome. And it's unfortunate when they fail, but it's reality.
And that's what John Yates was touching on, that you are just so unique and are so unique here in Atlanta compared to where a lot of people, or not even a lot of people, but more people were taking those similar sorts of risks to start companies out in Silicon Valley, but you were kind of on an island in your own here in Atlanta. And to some degree, that still feels like the tech environment to some degree.
Well, some of the companies that are here today came because we were here. I've had founders of companies that moved from California to Georgia approach me at public events and say thank you for starting your company in Georgia. When we learned how good it was to do business here, we decided to move from California and base our business in Atlanta. And that was rewarding. But I think one of the differences is that a lot of the investors, and I know SIG is this way, and there are quite a few of the venture capital funds in the Atlanta area that not only prefer to invest in a software company, but will not invest in a company that has hardware. Now, in my way of thinking, there's software companies that just do software, and that's usually become a SaaS or software as a service type of business. Then there's companies like Hayes was, where most of our technology was software, but we delivered it in a hardware enclosure with the specific hardware needed to implement a modem. And so while we did a lot of software, we put it in a hardware wrapper. Then there's other companies, like one that I work with today that's in the ATDC at Georgia Tech, RIF Robotics. They're taking a off-the-shelf robot arm. They've modified the fingers with some inventions to make improved fingers on the robot. And they are processing the medical devices that are used in surgeries, and they're putting together the surgical trays in a sterile environment and using the robot to pick up those instruments, identify that it's the correct instrument, look to see if it's clean, and then place it in the surgical tray in the right position so it'll be where the doctors need it once it's in the operating room. And that's a big opportunity because the robot helps eliminate mistakes. It also reduces the exposure of the employees to getting nicked or stabbed or cut with the medical instruments that are used to, making, there's scissors and knives and scalpels and whatever you call them. But a lot of them have sharp edges where you can get hurt. So it eliminates the employee accidents and eliminates the mistakes that often get made. And they're demonstrating that in the lab at this point and doing proof of concept demonstrations. But that's mostly software, but it's supported by the hardware of the robot and the feeding mechanisms that feed the robot. So for investors in Atlanta, that's still scary to them because they're afraid of that hardware inventory. Part of the risk is if you buy all these hardware components and intend to assemble them and sell it to your customer, what happens if the company goes out of business and you get stuck with all that hardware? That you lose that money, or you get pennies on the dollar for scrap value. Whereas if it's a software company, you don't have any hardware inventory to take a loss on. And I think that's a big piece of what they think about when they look at the investment scenario.
Now, again,